All right, now we're back to the Dvar Malchut. These are words that the Rebbe spoke in the end of 1991, Tafshin Nun Beit, and it's talking about Mashiach, and it's talking about what we have to do to bring Mashiach, and what's going to happen, what Mashiach is going to do, that we should desire Mashiach should come. And so the Rebbe here is explaining a very interesting detail, you say an interesting aspect, dimension, of how Israel is compared to the moon. And the Rebbe points out something that, first of all, it says that when Mashiach, the days of the Mashiach comes, it says that the moon will be like the sun. And really, that's the way it was when God created the world. The moon was an illuminator itself. It itself was the source of light. And that God, for whatever reason, he made the moon that it was only a receiver. But essentially, the moon is also supposed to give. And that's like the Jewish people. The Jewish people essentially are supposed to be the ones that reveal God in the world. They're supposed to be the ones that reveal God in the world. So to speak, they become the source itself. And eventually the whole world will become the source of godliness. We'll see the purpose of creation in every creation. We'll see the godliness that's keeping everything alive. And the reason why it's so, we'll see it in everything. It says the stones will cry out God's name. The whole world will cry out God's name. It says God will be one and his name will be one. In other words, the whole world will reveal how good God is and how good the world is, how God wants the world. That's why it says in the end of creation that God created, saw everything he made, and it was very good. Well, the world is very good right now. Fact is, but it's just covered over. And Mashiach will change everybody's mind. They'll stop being so selfish and thinking about themselves and going to heaven and all these weird religions that they have that talk about everything except for the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And then all of a sudden the world will be a different world. But first of all, it has to be that the Jewish people get themselves together, and the Jewish people are like the moon. So the Rebbe said, the Jewish people really are the source of godliness in the world. And that is indicated by, even though you don't see it now, even that's indicated by the moon. The moon, it gets bigger, right? In the first 15 days of the month, the Jewish month, gets big, there's more and more light. And then it gets smaller. But we see that the date increases. The date of the month increases. So it somehow or other, it means, and we're counting according to the moon, that the moon is getting bigger, that the date is getting bigger. So the Rebbe said, yes, the first half of the month when the light of the moon is more. But the second half of the month, the actual moon is more. The light, the first half, the light, so to speak, covers over the moon itself. You don't see the moon. But the second half of the month is the moon itself is revealed. The problem is that the revelation is so high that we can't accept it. So it's hinting at that there's something really, really high that's waiting to be revealed. And that's also indicated by the fact that when the moon is dark, really the fact is that it's facing the sun. The light side of the moon is facing the sun. It's not facing us. So we're getting a blast of the essence of the moon. It says that's really the whole essence of what the Jewish people is that the Jewish people itself will be an illuminator. Now it doesn't shine, the moon doesn't shine, we don't see the essence of the moon because of whatever reasons it is. But the time of Mashiach, we'll see the essence of the moon. Whether it's going to be, the moon is going to change, I don't know. But the fact is that the Jewish people will be. The Jewish people could be, maybe the moon will be the whole month, I don't know. It says that the moon is going to be like the sun. It'll be, so there won't be a full moon and any moon. It won't wax and wane anymore. It'll always be, and it'll even be brighter than it was before because in the beginning of creation. It says we can attach this whole idea with the parsha of the week. What's the parsha of the week? Vayishlach. Vayishlach. What happened in Parshas Vayishlach? Second. Yaakov meets up with Esav. So we have basically four Torah portions that talk about Yaakov. We have that Yaakov was born, Yaakov and Esav, and then we have And last week, the Yaakov went out from Beersheba, and then he dealt with Lavan. And then we have this week where Yaakov dealt with Esav. And next week, we're going to talk about the birth of Yosef. Right? All of a sudden, Yaakov's troubles that he has with his children. We'll see. So this week, by Yishlach Yaakov, Yaakov meets up with Esav. And next week is going to be Vayeshev. The Yaakov sat, and he tried to, in the land of Israel, and he tried to have a little bit of peace in his life. He already fought his battle, so he thought. Okay. And so Vayishlach and Vayeshev, let's compare that to what it was in Parshas Vayetze when he dealt with Lavan. Vayetze Yaakov and Toldot, when Esav was just born. Yaakov and Esav are mourning B'Parsha. And B'Parshas Vayishlach, in Parshas Vayishlach and Vayeshev next week, hey, they're talking about Begomer Avodas Abirurim. This week and next week, he's talking about how Yaakov finished the work that he had to do in the world. He already finished up with Lavan. This week he finishes up with Esav. And that he settled down in the land of Israel with all of his 12 sons. That's the Birurim. Yaakov fixed up everything that he could from Lavan and what was possible to do from Esav. Ad kedei kach, to the degree that Yaakov is already prepared. Lamami matzav shel yemot Mashiach. Yaakov is already prepared for the Mashiach. Said he already finished. Says that he said that Esav said, "I want to go with you," and Yaakov said, "No, we'll meet together in Har Seir." This is Har Seir. Says that's what Yaakov lefanav el Esav Arza Seir. You went to this place called Seir. That Yaakov went and informed Esav shenigmar v'nishlam b'tachlit hashlemos, that Yaakov said, I have finished, I have completed everything. The whole world has been refined according to as much as I can do. And now let's go together to the redemption. Vayelech avo el Adoni Seira. Yaakov said, I will come to you in Seir. That was the message he gave to the messengers that he sent, the angels that he sent. Yaakov sent. In other words, let's go together. This is the days of Mashiach, Kivmesh Mashiach, like it says in the days of the Mashiach, like it says right in the end of this Torah portion. It said in the Haftorah, the Olam Moshiim Bahar Tzion, that the saved ones will come into Mount Sinai in order to judge the mountain of Esav. That's Har Seir, says. And then God will be ruled. In other words, Yaakov and Esav will be together. Esav will admit all the bad things that he did, and he'll fix himself up. And Yaakov, he'll be able to unite himself with Esav. Esav will receive all these tremendous blessings, and the world will be a blessed, happy place. They were ready. They were ready back then. At least Yaakov was ready. And then next week is going to be Vayeshev Yaakov. Yaakov settled down in the land of Israel. Yaakov wanted to sit in peace. Yeshev b'shalom, that he was also in peace until Kafetz alav Rogshal Shal Yosef, until the whole story with Yosef, that his brothers sold him into Egypt, and there was a famine and all the story. The Odapan b'shalva be'eretz Mitzrayim, when he did reach the land of Egypt, right? He went down into the land of Egypt. So afterwards, he was in peace in Egypt. You realize there was Yosef. That's the parsha afterwards. You realize there was Yosef, and now he's sitting in peace. Kof Lamed, when he was 131, from the year 131 until the year 147 of his life. Ad Zman Kiyam Yud, until it says of Shalva and Mitit in the days of the Mashiach. Then will be the completion of the union of Para B'Shalom Nashi. Then there will be, like we say in Chabad about Yutet Kislev, Para B'Shalom Nashi. It's a sentence in Psalms, in Psalm 55, that the Alter Rebbe was saying when he got the news that he was freed from prison. Kefishim Abor, like the middle second Rebbe who explained also what is this whole idea of Parabashal Nafshi, explains it in great length in the days of the Mashiach. What's it going to be? He explains it also in this book. This is the second Rebbe of Chabad, in this book called Shari Tshuva. Beautiful. He explains it in great length. But often in a way that's even higher than it was in the time of David and Shlomo, how the days of the Mashiach are going to be greater than even the first temple, and how it wasn't the days of King Solomon when there was the peace in the world. And he explains how. Okay, so we have two periods of Yaakov's life. When Yaakov was working with refining Lavan and Esav, and when Yaakov was in peace. The difference between these two situations of Yaakov, when he was refining the world, working in the house of Lavan and meeting with Esav, the comparison to this between the time when he was at war, when he was working, to the time when he was finished the work and he was prepared for the days of the Mashiach, is something like the difference between the sun as it is receiving from the moon and how it will be when the moon when it's receiving from the sun, the moon when it's receiving from the sun, and the moon as it will be when it becomes an illuminator itself, when the sun and the moon are equal. Nowadays, the moon receives from the sun, it gets bigger and smaller. In the first part of the month, we see the light of the moon. The second part of the month, we see the essence of the moon, but it's too high. We can't receive it. That's like a battle. Things change. And the second, when the moon is full, then there's going to be permanent, the hidden part of the moon will be revealed. Let's see. Yaakov is like the moon. Yaakov is called the small light. Yaakov is called small. Why? Ki yakum Yaakov ki katanu. It says, who will stand up Yaakov because he is small? Where is this from? The prophecy of Amos, of the Amos, prophecy of Amos. Who will be Yaakov because he is small? Therefore, Hakatan Moneh Lakatan. Therefore, the small, namely the moon, he counts to the small, the Jewish people. The Jewish people are the smallest of all the nations, and the moon, which is small, therefore the Jews, they count according to the moon. Al-Pi, according to what's known, Shemiot Alavana, the fact that the moon gets less and less, like God said, Lechi Umati at that says on the fourth day of creation, that God told the moon, make yourself smaller, to be the small light. This is because Shvirat Kelim. This is connected to this whole thing we talked about of the breaking of the vessels of Tohu. That's the source of all confusion and bad in the world. Shenafel and Nitzutzas Kedushas, that the sparks of holiness fell below. Loki, and therefore Nasa Yerida, therefore there was what's called a descent in Malchut. That's the moon to be Bechinas Makabel. Therefore the moon had to receive. Leirid Labia Yitzir and Asir, that the moon had to come down into the physical world in order to refine the sparks of Torah, just like the Jewish people. But the Jewish people are supposed to be the teachers of the world. They're supposed to be the priests of the world. It's the holy nation. They're the center of the world, the Jewish people. And we see that it's not that way. That's like the moon. Sometimes the Jewish people catch on. They realize what's going on, like in the days of King Solomon, even the days of the Second Temple. And sometimes that's what the Jishamamet of Matzav Shalalavana, the moon that it has to receive from the sun, is L'tzorech Avodat. Why? Because it's that way, because we have to refine the world. Of Avogamor Avoda, that's why the moon has to receive. And that's why the Jews have to be scattered around the world, because we have to refine the world. But when the service of God is finished, when we've refined the world, Lotia Lavana, then the moon will not be a receiver anymore. Elia or Lavana, then the Jewish people, like the moon, will be like the light of the sun. Shnei Ma'oros Gadolim. The Jewish people will be examples of good. Now we see that the Jewish people, unfortunately, have had a lot of confusion into the world, right? There's sometimes the kings of confusion, the Jewish people. I mean, not that the founder of that religion, right, was a Jew. He was the star of the Gospels was the Jew. He made more confusion and more destruction in the world maybe than anything else. And the whole purpose of it was to destroy Judaism. Now maybe they're coming to their senses. I don't know, but I don't think so. But Hashem should help. Who knows what's going to be? But the Jewish people, instead of being receivers and being princes of darkness, will come to be princes of light. Yishlom, we can say, this is hinted at the whole parsha of Vayishlach, that Yaakov sent angels in front of him to Esav. What does it mean? In front of him, higher than himself. That Yaakov, his source, comes from the world of Tohu, Tikkun. And he sent these messengers, higher than himself, to a level which is above himself in level, to Esav. Yaakov is like the moon. So Yaakov wants to fix up the world. So the only way he can do it is he has to be above himself in order to fix up the world to his source in the world of Tohu. That's what he wanted. Yaakov wanted to be like the situation how the Jews are going to be when Moshiach comes, that they are the ones that fix up the world, not that they become part of the world, or even more, they become the kings of the confusion. That's what Esav was. Yaakov wanted to fix that up. In order to do that, he had to go to a source which is higher than himself, to the source of what Esav was. Kevin says, Alpi, you have to remember that God is creating everything, right? So he's creating Esav also. Kevin, since the Alpi Shaychusa the Yaakov, Harizeh Esav Shnid Barer, because as far as Yaakov was concerned, Esav was supposed to be refined. Because of the Shoshon, Esav went back to his source, into this level of what's called Makifim of Toh, the surrounding levels of Toh, tremendous powers of ingenuity and renewal and invention. That's the Esav, instead of using it to invent ways of destruction and the seduction or whatever it is, as he would use it for good. These surrounding levels of Tohu to him below in the world of Tikkun. That this is what's called an inner light. That was like we talked about just now with Rabbi Akiva. The Yoram Makif, then the surrounding levels will shine in an inner way in the world, and they'll be united together. And that's the whole idea of the joining. 1 second. What happened? Yes, okay. And this is also the whole idea of joining and unifying the moon and the sun. Yaakov and Esav. Esav was ideally, he was like the sun. And Yaakov was like the moon. Or Panimi or Makif. Mamalik Kolmim and Soviv Kolmim. To join these two things together. Until Shalavana, that the moon, that the moon will not have to receive from the sun, since it already has finished its work, all the sparks of Tohu, the moon coming down into the world to fix up the world, to illuminate the world at least a little bit. When it's finished, then it'll illuminate the world all the time. And then the moon had to make itself small in order to come into the world, like Yaakov. But the light of the moon will be equal to the light of the sun, and then both of them will be equal. The sun represents usually nature. And moon, instead of receiving from nature, like the Jewish people in the world, and that they have to receive from the non-Jews and worry about what the United Nations says and whatever, the Jewish people will be a source. The United Nations will say, before we make any decisions, we have to ask the Jews what they think and what's good. Then the Jews won't be the way they are now. The Jews will be connected to the Creator. So it says the Jews will be like the sun, shining all the time. Okay, all this is stressed, especially in our generation. So that's what we just finished saying. And the two Torah portions which talk about the battles of Yaakov, and then there's two Torah portions which talk about the peace of Yaakov, how Yaakov sat in peace, especially in Parshas Vayeshev and the end of Vayishlach. But it says all this is stressed, and that's going to be the two periods of the Jewish people, the two periods of the moon. When we have to struggle and we have to get bigger and smaller, but in the future it's going to be equal peace. Mashiach. Ubagdama, all this is stressed more in our generation. Ubagdama, sha'af shemitzad Yaakov, even though that because of Yaakov, everything has already been finished. And then it says that Yaakov, Yishlach Yaakov, the Yaakov sent to his brother Esau to tell him I'm finished. Hayata Yochel, it was possible and it was necessary that there should have been the redemption already, our generation. And therefore, Shalach Malachim, therefore Yaakov sent these messengers to Esau to let him know that everything is ready. Now the saved ones can come from the mount of Zion and they can judge the mountain of Esau. And that now we can be in peace. Nevertheless, it didn't really happen because of the world. But so what's that relevant to us now? Now, after we've already, that Yaakov fought with Esau, he did everything he could. This was almost 4,000 years ago. Now, after all of our deeds and all of our service of God, of all the Jewish people and all the generations, and you have to remember, good things are eternal. And bad things, mistakes that the Jews made, they dissipate. They go away. They're considered as being mistakes. As therefore, all the good things that the Jews did in all the course of all the generations, including especially the revelation of Torah Chassidut in Yud Tet Kislev, that then there began really a service of trying to bring Mashiach and preparing the world for Mashiach. So the deep ideas of the Torah are spread out to the whole entire world, that everybody is starting to realize that the Torah is really godly, pure godliness. But Mosif until Rabboseinu Nisienu, and every single generation of the Rebbes of Chabad, 7 generations, until the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Nasi Dorenu, he's the leader of our generation, and by means of him, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, there was spread out Judaism to all the ends of the world. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was the first one to come to America. And then they really started spreading out Judaism in all the different languages, Kavar Nigmru, and the Rebbe said, I'm just continuing what he's doing. So the Rebbe said, everything's already been finished. All of the things that were stopping and preventing the coming of Mashiach from the world have already been gone. They're gone. Kafisho Dio Machris, Shekavar Nishalma, we've already finished everything in service. And also the buttons have already been shined up. Everything is ready for the arrival of Mashiach. From this movement, it's understood that the service, continuation of the service that we're doing now, calls man all the time to the Mashiach, is delaying for whatever reason it is. It's totally not conceivable why we're not refining the world anymore. Shari Kavar this time, it's already been finished, this thing of refining the world. But now, Avoda Miyuchedes, everything now is a special service in order to reveal Mashiach in the world. La'avi is galus b'poel mam, to reveal godliness, to reveal Mashiach in the physical world. That's our job now. So, in other words, our attitude has to be a different attitude about what we're doing. It's not so much to refine the bad or the good. Now it's just everything has to be done in a way to receive Mashiach. That's what the Rebbe said. What's the Rebbe trying to get at? I mean, who embodies this? What are we supposed to do? So we'll see. Yeshlom, we can say Shamayla Miyuchedes, that the special, unique nature of our generation is also hinted at in this week's Torah portion by Yishlach. What does it say? Vayehi Beit Yaakov Eish. Says the house of Jacob will be for fire. We already talked about this before. Here we had it. It says in Ovadia. Ovadia says that the house of Jacob will be for fire. And the house of Yosef will be a flame. Yosef is the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. His name was Yosef. And the house of Esau will be like straw. Vayershu a Negev, and we will conquered the the south with the mountain of Esav, V'galut out Sarfat, until Sarfat. That's what it says to Sarfat. Conquered Sarfat. Now, Sarfat today means France. Is Yirshu at Arya Negev. They will take over the cities of the south, and all the Moshiim and the saved ones, the Jewish people, will come from the Mount of Zion, and they will judge the mountain of Esav. That's this week's Torah. Avadia speaks especially about Mashiach. That's what it means, Beit Yosef. Who is Yosef? The Beit Yosef is going to be the fire. That's the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Sheshemo Rishon, his first name was Yosef. This is the connection between the generations before that, until the Rebbe, for all the generations preceding him, until the first Rebbe, the Rebbe Yaakov, that's Beis Yaakov. She'al Yado, that because Yaakov was the one, he was the middle pillar. That's the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Balatanya. That by means of him, he brought all the Rebbes together, the previous Rebbe, that by means of him, spreading out Judaism outward in all of the places of the world, mamash. Before the previous Rebbe got out of Russia, I mean, he was evicted from Russia, but till he came to that, Chabad was contained in Russia. And Russia was the main body of where Jews were. Right? The Rebbe even said there's more Jews in Russia than all the world put together. They just don't know that they're Jews. The communism completely destroyed Jewish education. So there was 3-4 generations of Jews that they denied their Judaism. They didn't tell their children that they were Judaism. They didn't know that they were Jews. But when the previous Rebbe came to America, then he started spreading Judaism out. There's nothing further than it. And the furthest place for Judaism was France. France was probably the first. I mean, you can look and see, I'm no history major, but France was probably the first place where there was officially, I mean, I guess in the time of the Greeks there was a little bit, but the first place where there was officially accepted intermarriage in France. It was very common in France for Jews and not Jews to get married to this very day. Asher b'zmanu shel Rabbeinu Zaken, in the time of the first Rebbe of Chabad, that's when Napoleon, and also in the time of the previous Rebbes, Lo Yagilu Kavius, there was no France, the Chabad was never in France. There was not any set way of Fatzas Torah Chassidut in France. In France, for some reason, it was impervious to teachings of Chassidut. Lioto Tachton Lamata, because it was the lowest of the low. Ad kedei kach, so much that Rabbeinu Zaken, the first Rebbe, he was worried about the victory of France. A very interesting thing. The first Rebbe of Chabad was he died right at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon attacked Russia, and he won. He defeated Russia. But the problem is that he conquered Moscow. He took over the whole, right? The problem is that they burned all the places in Moscow, whatever it was, and that the winter set in a little bit early, and he wasn't prepared, and so he had to make a retreat. The Russian people, they moved away from where he was, and they burned all the land that they had, so he didn't have what to eat. There was no food. They thought they would take the grains and they would this, so they wrecked buildings and everything. But in any case, Napoleon had to go back to France for provisions, and on the way back there were like guerrilla forces of the Russians, the Cossacks, whatever, and they attacked Napoleon and they decimated his army. Now the Rebbe was very afraid of Napoleon, the first Rebbe of Chabad. Interestingly enough, all of the other Jewish leaders, maybe there were some other Hasidim, could be, but maybe Rebbe Levi of the Berditcher, but all the other leaders, Hasidic leaders, non-Hasidic leaders, they were all in favor of Napoleon. Napoleon was an enlightened person. This is an amazing story. He was a person. First of all, he had tremendous powers. Even in France today, he still is adored. They had this big building where his grave is. It's just just devoted to him in Paris. I mean, I saw it from afar. I didn't go there, but he still is like, adored and respected and held in awe. Napoleon, whatever he was. And Napoleon, he was like the champion of equality, liberty, fraternity, and equality. I don't know if he made up that slogan, but the slogan is still in France today. But he certainly embodied it. He personified liberty, equality, and fraternity. He was going to do away with the church. He was going to do away with anybody who wanted to be religious could be. He didn't, force anybody. And he was going to do away with the kings, and he was going to do it. It's going to be a world of freedom and equality and everything. That was Napoleon. And everyone was in favor of Napoleon. He was going to do it with the church. That would be great. There wasn't going to be any more, anti-Semitism. And Napoleon wanted to make the state of Israel. He wanted there to be a Sanhedrin. There's going to be 500 members of the Sanhedrin, the big court. There would be non-religious, great Jews. They would decide everything. And he wanted the Jews to go back to Israel. They would have their own state. They would be under him. And he would be like the emperor over the whole thing, but they would have the control. Everyone was in favor of Napoleon except for the first Rebbe of Chabad. The first Rebbe of Chabad, he was against, and he won. And then there was a whole thing with the sounding of the shofar, that he sounded the shofar first. Nevertheless, he said that if Napoleon wins, it'll be fantastic for the Jewish people physically, but it'll lift the glory of the Jewish people, he said, but spiritually it'll be disaster. And he did everything he could that Napoleon, even sent spies to Napoleon. Because the France and the spirit of France is the opposite of the spirit of Judaism. The spirit of France is no God, no purpose, no meaning. You just do what you just live, accept the fact that there's no meaning in the world. I remember I learned there's a famous French philosopher. He's still held in tremendous esteem in France, Jean-Paul Sartre. And he wrote huge books, genius books about how there's no God and there's no meaning and there's no purpose and there's no, they just live your life and just be who you are and just do what your thing and do your thing. And he even wrote a little book about how to get the Jews how the Jews are so special and the Jews are so unique. And the way to get them to assimilate is by befriending them and intermarrying with them. And then they'll drop all their, but Davka B'Dorenu Zeh, only in our generation, France was the enemy of Judaism. The opposite says in our generation now, we see that by means of Beit Yosef, by means of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, there is revelation of spreading out Hasidut in Tzarfat, and especially in Tomchei Tamimim, until in Lubavitch, out there, just like a kid, like it was, that now in France, it's just like it was in Lubavitch. There was a famous Hasid over there called Rabbi Nissim Nemenov. I met him once in Brenois, and therefore Higia B'Pol Azaman V'Yershu Etar in Negev. That now is the time when we can overcome the mountains of the south, and the saved ones will come from the Mount of Zion to judge the Mount of Esav. As we are going to continue, God willing, tomorrow. So we'll end this tomorrow. Talk a little bit more about France also.
Did you say Rav Mendel of Rimanov?
Rav Nissim Nemenov.
Oh, okay.